Imagine you're a gifted and bright student. You're skipped a year in elementary school despite being emotionally unready to do so, and as a result feel alone and isolated. By the time high school rolls around, between the pressure trying to fit in paired with your own perfectionism, you start self-medicating with drugs and alcohol. Fast forward to college where your addictions continue, and because you are so high functioning, you are in denial that there's even a problem. After your third DUI, you're sitting in the back of a police car, suddenly facing jail time. So you decide the easiest solution to your problem is to take your own life right then and there in the backseat of a police car. This is exactly what happened to today's guest, Amiee Boswinkle. If you want to know exactly how she dug her way out from her own rock bottom, you're going to have to finish this episode to find out. If you've been battling addictions, you're not going to want to miss out on this episode. By the end of it, you'll know how to get to the root of your impulses, how diet can play a central role in helping you heal from your addictions, as well as where to find the crucial support that you'll need in order to do it. My name is Corey Logaitis, and I'm a life and business coach who helps adversity survivors find purpose by creating value-driven businesses. Here on The Corey Lo Show, I love featuring conversations with entrepreneurs who are finding a way to make their mark on this world, and Amiee is one of them. If you're interested in self-help and motivational content surrounding how to deal with and process life's challenges, then you're in the right place. Be sure to hit subscribe to get notified of when new episodes air. Now let's dive into this show. Amiee Boswinkle is a certified health coach and intuitive healer. Amiee touches the hearts and lives of people battling PTSD, trauma, and addictions by helping them free themselves from their own minds. I'm so excited to have Amiee on the show here to share her inspirational story with you today. And now it's time for the story to begin.
Hello and welcome to the Corey Lo Show. We're so excited to have everybody join us today. Today I am joined by Amiee Boswinkle. Thank you, Amiee, for joining. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great, Corey. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so excited to share with your audience.
Oh my goodness, I am so excited to have you share your story with everybody. So I always start off each and every show with the same question. So I'm going to ask you, what was your childhood like? What would you like to share with the audience today?
My childhood was full of anxiety, honestly. I can remember from a very young age, I didn't quite know it then. I knew that there was like a feeling inside of my heart, and it felt like very strong. What I now know was that it was panic. I think I was having panic attacks. I can remember having them very, very young and being around energy of other people, and just kind of what I didn't realize is I think I was taking on energy of other people. There were a lot of arguments in my home, specifically around money. And I didn't feel at the time like I fit in with the other kids at school. So there was just a lot of anxiety. There was a lot of, felt like I didn't fit in, felt like I wasn't good enough, a lot of fear in my childhood.
Oh, wow. And what was prompting that for you? Was there any specific like experience, or was it more because I know you had mentioned you have intuitive gifts. Was it a result of that? What do you tie to that?
When I look back on it now, what I kind of tie it to is I was sexually abused when I was very young. Mm-hmm. I can't say the exact time frame. It was before I started kindergarten, so somewhere maybe between the ages of 3 and 5. And it was by a family member, and the family member told me to never tell or I wouldn't be loved anymore. Nobody would love me in my family. Mm-hmm. So I didn't tell. I didn't tell for a long time until I was in maybe my late teens or my early 20s. It's hard. Like I've really tried to go back and pinpoint exactly, but it's in my later teens or my early 20s that I finally told somebody. I didn't tell a family member until I was in my early 20s. So I believe it was from that. I believe it's because I was told to never tell. So it took away my voice.
Sure.
And it shut me down for a long time in my life. I lost my voice and didn't feel like I fit in or could speak in any way, shape, or form.
Right. Makes complete sense. Wow. So having gone through that, And then you had mentioned, we had talked about your intuitive gifts before. When were you first aware of them, being a gift? How did that end up manifesting in your life?
I don't know if I truly knew per se that I had a gift. It was just very innate to me. But when I was 3, I can remember very specifically the first time I kind of recognized that I could see things. And we would, my dad would say, "Oh, we're going over to your grandma's house today." And my mama, so my great grandma, was sick. I didn't really understand it then, but what I know now is she had cancer. And we would get in the car and my dad would say, "You can't go and visit mama. She's going to be sleeping. She's not feeling well." And we would get over, and in my head, I was like, well, I know that the adults are going to get caught up in conversation and they're going to ignore me. And that will be my time to like sneak down the hallway and go into her room. So we would arrive at my grandma's, and my brother was quite young then, I think 1, maybe not even quite 1. And we would be playing in the living room and all the adults would be in the kitchen. And once I knew that they weren't looking at us anymore, they were caught up in the conversation, I would sneak my head around the door frame there and make sure they were all having their coffee and talking. And I would sneak real quiet down the hallway and open the door to Mama's room. And I would go into Mama's room, and she had this beautiful antique nightlight with the circular turn on, turn off switch. I'm dating myself right here, but kind of pushed it with your hand there. And I would play with that until she would wake up, and she would have the hugest smile on her face, and I would smile, and she would, pick me up, and I'd kind of crawl up into bed, and I would see an angel in the room, and the angel would tell me what to tell her, not to be afraid, and that she wasn't going to be in pain anymore. And that where she was going to be loved, and she was still going to be able to see us, and we would still be together. And I would share that with her because I knew she was scared. And we would lay there for hours and hours, and it felt like hours when you're 3.
Right.
And so I always was very connected to, back then I said God. Now I say the universe, that's my wording now. But I was always very connected to God when I was very young, always prayed a lot and had a very direct connection, probably until my mid-teens. And then I started to just recognize the world and wanted to fit in a little more with my peers, which I didn't do. And I think I ignored that part of myself for a long time, probably until just a couple of years ago when I was 40.
Wow. So, when you were 3, and you had this experience, with the angel and your grandmother, being so young, was there any fear that you felt at all, like seeing this, other being and like communicating this way? Or was there like, I don't know, I'm really curious, to hear what that was like, as a 3-year-old.
No, it was very normal. To me, that was very, very normal. And until I was probably a young teenager, if you would have asked me who my best friend was, I said God.
Wow. I'm all like tingly. That's an incredible story. Wow. So going into your teenage years, from there, where did life take you?
I had a small group of friends, but even though I had that at that time, I didn't recognize how much of a gift it truly was to have friends that cared about you. I was always so focused on the kids that I wanted to be my friend and wanted to fit in a different space. I had this crazy, unruly, curly hair that stuck out kind of like Ronald McDonald. It was orange, and now that I'm older, my hair's kind of gotten more blonde and gray in spots even, but I had really kind of orangish red hair, and it stuck out, and it was frizzy, and I had acne all over my face, and just I was made fun of course, I was a kid and I was very sensitive. I was very sensitive and I internalized that and created these stories that I was stupid and that I was fat and that I was ugly. And none of those things were true, but they were stories that I created that I really, really, really believed. And it kept me really disconnected from others for a very long time in my life.
Wow. And in what ways did you disconnect from people?
I disconnected by not connecting.
Right. Okay.
And I think that part of that was just because I couldn't verbalize my feelings. And I really believe now that that stems back from being told to never tell,
Sure.
that don't ever tell stories. So I didn't really know how to have feelings. I just knew pain. For many years of my life, the only feeling I think I really understood and knew very well was pain and heartache and feeling separate.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't feel like I could connect because I didn't know how to verbalize feelings. I didn't know how to share who I truly was. And honestly, I didn't know who I truly was.
Right. Wow, that had to be painful. Feeling that isolated, that you can't connect with people. Was it around this point in time, because I know you and I had spoken, earlier, that addictions played a large role, in your early life. Was this around the time that those came into play?
My parents were strict. So they always had to, I always had an earlier curfew than others. And if I went out, there had to be adults around, or they had to know exactly who I was with. And I had to be home at a very specific time. I felt very imprisoned by that. I had already felt imprisoned by the fact that I couldn't speak. But by having all of what I considered like a bunch of restrictive rules, it created even more of a prison cell within myself. I felt very imprisoned. I didn't feel free. So I didn't start using alcohol and drugs until I was a later teenager. I started school a year early. I was very smart. I didn't realize I was smart because of the stories I told myself, but I was very smart and I started school a year, even though the cutoff date, I was still eligible to go in that year. Emotionally, I wasn't ready, but
Mm-hmm.
I still want, because mentally, my brain power qualified me to start school then. So I was one of the younger ones in the class. I wasn't the absolute youngest, but I was one of the younger ones in the class. So I graduated when I was 17. And I think it was right around then that I started using alcohol and drugs. And it became very much a very huge part of my life by the time I went to college that fall. I had turned 18 in August. So by the time I started college, I was I was off on my own. There were no rules. I finally felt free, and I made friends that I felt very like the kind of friends that I wanted to have, but we partied a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I went to school full time and I worked full time and I partied full time in college. So it got really strong in college.
Oh, wow. How do you find enough time to be able to do all of that in college? That had to have completely worn you out.
Yeah, I look back on it now, Corey, and honestly, I don't know how. I had this really fiery drive inside of me. I was very high functioning, and that's how I justified it in my mind, is that I was still able to go to, I'm not saying I never missed class because I'd be lying. I did, miss class here and there. But I justified it by I was going to class, I was getting good grades. I was able to hold a job, full time. I went to school full time. I worked full time. Most of my college career, I worked full time. There were a few times I went down to part time, and I partied full time. And I just have always had this really fiery drive and passion inside me that kept me moving forward. There was this part of my brain that didn't allow me to fail, a perfectionist piece, I guess, what might make sense in our conversation here, that I couldn't not turn in homework, or I couldn't not show up to work. It was very strong within me that I just couldn't not do those things.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned the perfectionist piece, because I personally have had ties to 2 relationships in my life, you know, that I strongly loved the person, but they were addicted to something in some way, shape, or form. And both of them were extreme perfectionists. You know, so, you know, how do you feel, did your perfectionism tie at all into your addictions? You know, were you like helping to manage stress with it? What was fueling, you know, you continuing to, you know, follow through, you know, with drinking and with alcohol and whatever else? What was the motivating factor?
I didn't want my parents to know that I was using alcohol and drugs. So and I think certain other people who I thought might judge me. So other adults. I mean, my close friends knew what I was doing, but like my employers and my parents and other important people in my life didn't know that, or at least I believed that they didn't know it.
Mm-hmm.
So I did it to show them that I was going to school and I had a job, so that they didn't think that anything was wrong. So I loaded up on the outside to the outer world, to the people I wanted to see that everything was fine. I was doing well, and I was succeeding, and I was moving forward. While on the inside, right, I had created this alternate reality so that I could hide behind my pain.
Wow, that's so interesting. So in a way, your perfectionism and, you know, you performing and being an overachiever and presenting to the outside world, everything was just fine because you're getting good grades and you're going to school and all this. It more or less allowed you to continue doing what you were doing to yourself, because it's, what's the word I'm using for it? It kind of provided a mask that everything was okay, that you can handle it, and therefore it was justified that you can continue going. Would that be correct in what you're saying?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow.
You hit it right on the head. It was the mask that allowed me to keep on going and saying that it was okay.
Wow. So, I mean, at what point, or was there any point, because you were able to hold it all together in real life, that you realized that you had a problem?
All of my friends knew that I had a problem. You know, in college, I had amazing friends, people that I loved very, very much. You know, it's not meant for me to say if they had problems or not with alcohol or drugs. It's not my space to say that. But they would sit me down occasionally and let me know that they were concerned for me. And because for me, Corey, it was like one drink. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, one drink did something different, like one sip, not just like a whole beer or whatever. It was like one sip turned me into a completely different person. And I could feel it in my body. In fact, the first time I remember that I drank, it was like within 1 or 2 sips, and something took over me, and I blacked out. Like, I would black out very easy, like by a half a beer or 1 beer, but I had this bottomless pit, you know, towards the end. I could drink, you know, a case of beer, you know, and be taking like a lot of drugs at one time. I had this really high capacity. So I told myself, with the mask that we just talked about, because I was still able to go to work, and I still paid my bills, and I still went to class, right? I was functioning. I told myself I was a functioning alcoholic and I was a functioning drug addict, and that was okay for me. Like, I was okay with that, even though when I drank or used drugs, I became a completely different person, and nobody in my life wanted to be around me. It still didn't make me stop, because I had created this illusion in my head that, oh, I'm still functioning like the way society says I should function. So I made it okay in my head, and I would laugh about it. I would be like, I'm a functioning alcoholic. Like, that was completely and totally normal.
Wow. And I mean, earlier you had mentioned too that, excuse me, that, you know, in your late teenage years, you know, early 20s, that a lot of your relationships, you're really purposely disconnecting with people, you know, by not attempting to connect, where your addictions and your reactions in particular, like you had just described to alcohol, was that just another way for you to disconnect even further? You know, was it subconscious that you were doing that, you think, or was it like on purpose that you knew that you know, like you would have that drink and you would change, like you were different, Amiee?
That's a really powerful question, Corey. Wow, thank you for that. That just gave me like a huge aha moment. um, I think, and you asking it in that way, in such a powerful way, that I was it was subconscious, because there were times I consciously didn't want to drink,
Mm-hmm.
but I did anyway. And I believe that what was happening is that my true self felt like she could come out when I was inebriated, but she was so like messed up, because what I was truly searching for was freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And when I drank or used drugs, I felt free. I felt like I could dance or sing or wear whatever clothes I wanted. And, you know, sometimes those clothes were scanty, you know, like,
Right.
you know, there was this part of me that just wanted to be free, just wanted freedom more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I was sober, there was a part of me that just felt trapped and imprisoned. So I really believe that it was the subconscious part of me wanted to be seen more consciously, and that alcohol and drugs were that way to be seen.
Wow, that is so powerful. Because I mean, so many people too, you know, especially with alcohol, you know, one of the reasons that, you know, people will go to get drinks on a first date, for example, is to kind of release some of those inhibitions so that you could be more relaxed, that you could do what you want and not have to worry, you know, about what other people are thinking. So that makes complete sense, you know, that you would be using it in a tool for that manner. Wow. Mm-hmm. So from that point, you know, I mean, at what point, how long were you, you know, addicted on this level? You know, how long did you sustain that for?
I let's say 17, and then I got my third DUI when I was 29. And then there are points after 29 where I would use drugs and alcohol for short bursts of time, when I would find myself in places that I would say I felt depressed, because maybe I wasn't happy with what was going on in my life. But the level at which you're speaking was from 17 to 29, where I was just going crazy with alcohol and drugs. And by the time I was 29, it had started to affect relationships in a very intense way. And also it affected my job.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, what happened from that point? You know, it affected your job. Did you have to go, you know, to a program? Like how did you work through that challenge and that fork in the road?
So by the time I was 29, that I had gotten my third DUI. By that point, I had been in and out of inpatient detox centers, AA, NA. I was seeing a therapist. I was on prescription medication. I'd been in and out of psych wards because I was suicidal by that point, many times suicidal. My drug addiction escalated into IV heroin use, and the third DUI did it, because with that one, I was looking at spending a year in jail, and that to me was my bottom. I hit a telephone. I was driving. I get emotional about this still. Thank God I didn't hurt anyone. I only hurt myself. But but I hit a telephone pole head on in my car. And the police came and obviously arrested me, and I was sitting in the back seat of the police car and attempted suicide from the back of the police car on the way to the police station, because I knew that this was going to be a possibility of me going to jail for a year, and that scared the crud out of me. By this point, my family had turned their back on me. That DUI, because I missed work, I lost my job over it. When I got to the police station, they obviously called an ambulance, and I was sent to the psych ward again, till I was stable.
Sure.
Once I was stable, I was re-released back to the police, and my parents, out of the kindness of their hearts, posted bail for me, allowed me back into their home, but told me that I had to have a job in order to work, in order to come back home and live with them. But they weren't willing to drive me anywhere, so I had to find something within walking distance. And about 3 blocks away was a health food store. And I got hired at that health food store. And it saved my life. It saved my life. And I started to study the human body. The people there taught me all these things about, natural health and detoxification and protein and adrenal fatigue. And I mean, you name it. And I was able to start healing my physical body. I had extensive liver damage by this point. I had acne all over my face. I was heavier, I was probably 10 or 15 pounds heavier than what I am now, and started to heal on a physical level. What I didn't understand, because even though at 29, I went to that health food store and I started to heal and I started to understand, and I found that there were 5 things that I personally wasn't taught by my doctors or therapists, or, and I'm not against conventional medicine or AA or NA in any way, shape, or form. They work for many people. And, but my story is, I know, a little different and maybe the same as some other people's. But I found there were 5 things that, if these things were just addressed, that on the physical level, like people's energy could improve, they could start to feel better, their sleep would improve, their hormones would balance. But what I didn't understand at the time, right, even though my physical body was healing, and I had just said to you, between 29 and age 40, there were short bursts of time where I did go back to drinking, because I didn't understand then the sabotages of the mind.
Sure. The mind plays a big part in that. I know you had mentioned just now, you mentioned 5 things, and I would like for you to share those 5 things, but I think it's interesting that, you figured those out, because even for myself and my own coaching that I do, as far as, emotional health and wellness goes, I usually teach 10 things, 5 of which are physical, and deal with the functioning of your actual body, and 5 are mental, for your mental health. So I'm curious, what were the 5 things that you had learned?
So for physical healing was to watch the intake of sugar and carbs, because sugar and carbs increased the insulin response in the pancreas. So whenever we put the sugar and carbs in the body and it goes into the digestive system, it shoots a signal straight to the brain. And the brain doesn't understand that what you have is sugar. To your brain, it's an emergency state. And so the brain sent the signal to the pancreas to release the insulin into the body, because to the body, it didn't understand the difference between, like, you were dying or you just intook a bunch of, sugar or carbs. So alcohol turns to sugar in the body. And that was something that I was ignorant to back then. And when because of how much alcohol, I was drinking and my diet wasn't as great as it is now, that created Candida in the body. And Candida is a type of yeast overgrowth. We all have this type of yeast in our gut. However, when we're eating too many sugar and carbs, it overgrows and it can stretch the intestines and make it kind of thin. And whenever the intestines stretch and are a little thin, it causes something called leaky gut. And so when leaky gut occurs, that Candida can leak into the bloodstream. And because Candida is a type of yeast and it's a living organism, all it wants to do, just like human beings, is stay alive. And so it is causing cravings, of sugar, because that's what it feeds on. So then I understood that I had a yeast overgrowth, a Candida overgrowth in my body, and that had caused inflammation. So that's number 3. Number 2 is Candida. Number 3 is inflammation. So now what I understood is that my body just had a whole bunch of inflammation in it, and that's what was causing the acne, and that was causing me to be a little heavier than I wanted to be. Although I didn't, like I said, didn't understand all these things. Then it caused the inflammation caused foggy thinking. So did the Candida, though, and it caused just pain in the body. But mostly what I recognized was the acne was like the telltale sign on my face that something was going wrong inside of my body, which led to digestive distress, right? Because whenever we have too much inflammation in the body, it causes digestive distress. Most people that I find, because I worked at that health food store for 12 and a half years, so I got a lot of education around a lot of different things and helped a lot of people overturn many various health ailments within themselves, not just alcoholism and drug addiction. But when we aren't taking care of our body and we're eating foods that don't necessarily agree with it, most people that I know anyway, they think that like burping or gas or heartburn are like very normal things. And what I've learned is that those things are just signals that the body is just trying to tell us this doesn't feel right, this isn't correct, right? I've just come to label it a different word. It's just a signal for change. And whenever we get those things, it just means that, hey, like this food isn't agreeing with me, or this isn't agreeing with me. Let's try something new. And that whenever I was putting all the alcohol and drugs in my body and not eating correctly, we're born with a certain, so to speak, bank account of digestive enzymes, and they don't regenerate. So amylase, which breaks down carbs and sugar, is the first digestive enzyme in the digestive system to start to diminish. So I was like, oh, wow, that's a huge aha. Like I was ingesting all these carbs and sugar, and amylase is the one that breaks down carbs and sugar in the digestive system. But because I had overloaded my body with all of these things, I had diminished it faster than somebody who probably didn't drink as much as I did or eat as many carbs as I did.
Wow.
And
that's incredible.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, I could talk about this for you have me on my soapbox right now, but I'll keep it brief. And so the fifth thing is that it led to adrenal fatigue. And so the adrenal fatigue, the adrenal glands sit right above the kidneys, and they're the size of peas, and they emit a hormone called cortisol. And cortisol is what helps to calm down the fight or flight response in the body. What I learned is that the body is so prehistoric and so beautiful. Like, I just think the human body is just so miraculous, because it is always doing everything in its power to keep us alive. And we don't even have to think about it until something goes wrong.
I have to agree with you. Yeah, it's incredible.
It's so amazing, right? And it's just like tapping into the teeny tiny subtle signals that something's off track, and like what we can do to correct that. But to go back to the cortisol being put into the body to calm down the fight or flight response so that we literally don't have a heart attack. And so that hormone, or the central nervous and autonomic systems, nervous system response, it's just trying to keep us alive, right? Like, we don't understand the difference between we're being chased by a lion or we just got cut off in traffic. Right? Our logical brain knows that, but our body doesn't. So that nervous system response, we emit that hormone cortisol into the body so that we don't have a heart attack. And it just keeps us alive. And so the more stressors we have, and who doesn't have stress in their life, right? it's just that cortisol response is always, going strong. And what allows that cortisol response to like keep going was the sugar and carbs. So I realized that it was a vicious circle. Like
Right.
we were literally creating our own cravings, and we were literally creating our own stress states because we were just in these like cyclical like thought and food loops, within ourselves.
Wow. So learning these 5 things and then putting it into place for yourself, how long was it before you were able to, fully heal from what you had gone through?
I would say 5 to 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just on the physical body level, because I only want to be in integrity. The sabotages of the mind, I didn't understand, like I said, until about two years ago completely.
Mm-hmm.
And started to implement things that shifted my mindset and helped me stay grounded and in the moment, and tools that I practice every day just to stay strong and be the most powerful version of myself that I can be in any given day.
Right. Okay. So how are you after, you worked at the health food store, you said, for 12 years, right? So through this experience, how did you, come to where you were working today, where you are helping people, as a result of everything you had went through?
So when I was working at the health food store, we were told, because the internet say some people were saying to buy more supplements online, rather than coming into the store. Sales were down a little bit, and there was the possibility, we got told in a meeting, that maybe, if the sales kept going the way that they were, people's hours would be cut. And I knew that I needed to have a certain amount of hours to pay my bills. And so I thought, well, I better start looking out in the world and see what's available for me. And I knew that I didn't have it in me to go to school for, 4 or 6 years. My inside just said that just didn't feel right, but that I was willing to do maybe 1 or 2 years worth of school. This was in, I want to say 2016. And I fought like the plague, going online, like just technology in general, like it just doesn't jive with me. I've learned to navigate what I have to. I love talking to people. I love sharing my story, but one of my weaknesses is technology. But I was forced to go online and Google search. That was new to me. In 2016. I know that's kind of funny to say, but to me, it just wasn't a space I wanted to be back then. So I Google searched and I found this thing called a health coach. And I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. And I was reading about it, and, people were having success. And the school that I chose to go to said that you could graduate in as little as 6 months and as much as a year. And I was like, oh, well, I could do that. I would love to learn something new, and I love to help people with their health. And so I decided to go to that school, and my whole life upgraded in a way that I had absolutely no way possible. I had never heard of the word coach before. I had no idea what it was. And it really revolutionized my world and gave me new tools and new powerful opportunities to help other people in a bigger and more powerful way than I had already known how to do. It's allowed me to step away from that job at the health food store and become a boss, something I never thought possible. Yesterday, I got my established in a collaborative book with other women who have overcome mediocrity. I never in a million years thought I could be an author. And just so many amazing things are happening. And I'm just so grateful. I'm just so grateful because my heart just wants to share with people who have suffered from trauma and PTSD and addiction, to create peace within their minds so they can find it in their life, because I know how painful it is to feel so alone and so isolated and feel like you're unworthy and not lovable and live in shame and guilt. And that's what I'm all about. It's just about getting the message out there. And if all I ever do, Corey, is just touch one person's life, just one, and help them see something a different way, or I touch their heart in some way, or I shatter the prison of their own mind, then I've served my mission on this earth.
Oh my God, I share the same mission. I got goosebumps listening to you talk. It's incredible. And I have to say, it's so beautiful listening to you talk about, you know, becoming an author, in part because when we had first started this conversation, you know, and you're talking about how what fueled, you know, a lot of, you know, with your addiction and your life in general was, you know, from a very, very young age, feeling like you didn't have a voice. And what more amazing manifestation of finally finding your voice is becoming an author. I mean, it's your voice, you know, presented to others, written on paper. It's, wow, that's so powerful. That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So how else are you currently using your past experiences to help other people? You got the book coming out. What else are you working on?
I also am in a public speaking competition. It's the first season. It's called The Next Impactor. It's for coaches or people who feel they have a very powerful story to share with the world. It's going to be very similar to like The Voice and Dancing with the Stars. So it's based on public vote. So far, based on public vote, I'm in second place out of more than 100 people.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Never in a million years would I thought this is the space, you know, where I'm going to be. The first round of cuts is happening this Saturday night at 7:30 p.m. It's on Facebook. People are interested, they can go to the Next Impactor Facebook business page and watch and see if I get cut. They're picking the top 50 people, so more than 50 people are going to get cut. And will be signed our coach on that day. So that's another opportunity for me to just get my message and my voice out there. And it's surrounded, honestly, every single person in that group has such a powerful and beautiful story. And it's just such an honor, and I'm so humbled to be surrounded by so many powerful people, including you, Corey. I just think the world of you and for what you provide to your audience. I think it's amazing, and I just find it very admirable, and hope that one day the universe deems me worthy enough to, you know, stand up there and be seen in a bigger, brighter light as well. So we'll just see where that takes us. And I also work with people in my coaching business one-on-one. I have group programs, and I also go out into my personal community once a month and publicly speak at the church that I go to, Unity of Northwest Indiana, as a community give back, just to share about getting rid of shame, or how to release toxic relationships, or how to use healthy foods, or, you know, just whatever I feel I can give back to the community, what was so freely given to me, so that other people can just have tools, a day or a hardship or a place where they feel stuck or lost. It's what my heart just says to do.
Oh, it's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So question I wanted to ask you. So anybody who is either listening or watching this show right now, who is in a similar place that you were in your past, whether, you know, they were molested as a child, or they're battling, you know, alcohol or drugs, you know, trying to find their voice, what would you want them to know now, having gone through what you went through?
There is a way. There is a way for you to heal. There is a way for you to break through the things that you feel you can't. And maybe if the traditional approaches out there aren't working for you, there are alternative approaches out there And that's what worked personally for me. So just be hopeful and, connect with a community of people that talk to your heart. To me, I found I'm an isolator by nature, but I push through that every day and make sure that I have a community that I connect with, even if it's just through like a Facebook community where the person is presenting, free things or listening to podcasts like yours, Corey. Just being connected to community as much as possible, and just know if you want to get better, you can. There is absolutely a way that you can. Never give up. Never, ever, ever give up.
Wow, I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you. So speaking of community, for our viewers and listeners who would like to get a hold of you and learn more about you, where can they find you?
They can find me on Facebook. They can connect with me on my personal page, Amiee Boswinkle. My business page is called Connections Restored on Facebook. I have a private Facebook group for people specifically who have suffered from trauma, PTSD, and addictions. And that is the Village of Connections Restored. They can also find me on my website is connectionsrestored.com. And I'm also on Instagram at Connections Restored. I can also be reached by email, amikboz@yahoo.com. And I am more than happy to communicate with anybody who feels that they feel stuck or lost. Please don't be afraid to reach out to me. I want to be a light in your darkness if I can be.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'll be sure that we link up to you in the show notes, so that everybody who wants to get a hold of you will be able to. And I so appreciate you sharing your story with us today. You are so brave. You're such a courageous woman. You have no idea. Your story touched me on a level that I haven't heard in a long time. So thank you for being brave and sharing. And I appreciate that we were able to connect, and I look forward to hopefully being able to stay in touch with you and work with you again in the future. So thanks for taking the time today.
Thanks, Corey.
And there you have it. If you've taken anything away from my conversation with Amiee today, I really hope it's this. Addictive behaviors are band-aids for avoiding the emotional pain of past hurt. It's much, much easier to numb the pain or not feel it at all than it is to experience it and learn what's meant to be learned of it. So by getting yourself into therapy or other counseling and services to be able to help you dig into exactly what the root of your pain is, that's going to help you have better success when you decide to get clean. Rock bottom can be the solid foundation for rebuilding a brand new life. Had Amiee not had her moment in the backseat of that police car, she never would have not had a car in order to be able to get a job, which forced her to be walking to that health food store, which in turn taught her so much about nutrition that she's now able to share that with others as her profession. And on that note, the body is incredibly resilient, granted you treat it well and you feed it well. Nutrition plays a vital, vital role in this, and it's amazing how resilient the body can be when you give it what it needs. Did you like this episode? If so, hit like if you did, dislike if you didn't. I promise I will not be offended. I want to know what you thought. And if you know somebody who is battling an addiction who may see value in this episode, please be sure to share it with them. I would really appreciate it. Ready for even more inspirational and motivational stories? Head on over to my website, www.coreylowe.com, and sign up for my email list. Every single week, you'll receive tips, tools, resources, and interviews to help you lead a more emotionally fulfilling life and business. I look forward to connecting with you there.